Jojima, Summer of Love, 23, episode 12. Yeah, 12 days of listening to what wants to be heard. And tonight I'm sitting here with Leslie, and we have been just noticing how many of our connection points are going through inflection points. Right? Is that the lead? And what you're going through right now, Ben used the term the other day, he's going through a pruning of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Getting much more discerning about his areas of interest, and like trusting his inner wisdom keeper more than the performative response we have to society right now. Like, I just see people going deeper and deeper into trust in themselves. Is that how it feels like to you?
Well, I think we're having more choice around that. Because I see people that are not moving in that direction, but I see a lot more people that I feel like who are.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives me some hope.
Choice, agency, free will, it's really up for conversation right now. We're recognizing how much of what we thought was free will has been influenced by so much fear and conditioning and trauma response. Like, we're just one big walking coping mechanism. Right? Everybody, everywhere, all the time is figuring out, how do I fit in? How do I belong? How do I survive? How do I get through another day? And it's at such an existential weightiness. People are exhausted. They're just
people are exhausted.
They're neuro deficiency, neuro emergency, neuro emergence that's happening. I have this sense that I got this hit a while back about, I kept asking, is there a point at which our lust for life outweighs our lust to be right? Like, is there a moment where we surrender to a different story because the old story clearly is going against our own enlightened self-interest? There's a rational self-preservation point we're reaching that begins to force us to look at all of the conditions, scarcity, belief systems that we've carried from generation to generation. We're suffering from a failure of imagination. That 90-10 thing I've been sharing so much of lately, it only takes 10% of our structural motivation to get the project to an almost finished point, but to really own what it is, you have to clear out all the story. And so this is, you got to go all in. You got to completely commit to your wholeness. And it feels so self-indulgent. It feels like, I don't deserve this. I'm being too kind to myself. And so we self-sabotage it. And it just kept hitting me that a child at no point says, I'm having too much fun. It's that we're not wired to turn off this level of ecstatic engagement with this human experience. Children, if we get it right, we never lose that. that I've been opening up this healing bridge map, the shameless bridge, and I just delivered the first sort of round of it. And there's an element of this conversation around what would it look like if we could actually agree on an exit strategy from this current um, fear-based entanglement, nervous system diminishment, immune system compromising. Like, there are so many physical symptoms right now of our disconnection, of our self-abandonment. And it's a learned self-abandonment. And so we just get to learn the lesson. When I used to work with businesses, the biggest part of the project wasn't the metrics that we came up with. It was the process of understanding how the company worked to learn the metrics. It was a way of raising the stakes for everybody in the company, because when you understand your interconnectedness with everything else that's happening in the company, you feel like you belong, you matter, you have value in a communal setting. And we have lacked that nervous system benefactor of feeling like we belong in community. That's why so many young people are like, let's go buy property. Old women are putting all their stakes up and buying motels and creating communities. Like, this is the question I kept asking, is there a point where our own nervous system has a brownout? And I thought, yeah, I've been through a nervous system brownout. Have I ever had a hard boot? And I think there were 6 months of post-psychedelic toad journey schism that I had, where I had a complete hard reboot on my nervous system. And you and I've talked about what we see happening in the psychedelic space and our concerns around a lack of understanding of how these medicines are to be held, and the above ground, the underground, the clinical, the economic, all the factors that are bearing down on this beautiful light that's coming forward on the planet. And there's such an invitation for us to shift our orientation around these plants from a fix to the old construct to the opening of the conversation of the new story. Like, I think people are still thinking we're going to fix what we have. And I think it's the psychedelics that are showing us that it's so much more expansive and beautiful, and the quantum amplification factor of all of us coming online in a relatively generationally oriented way. Like that movie we watched tonight, Torn, you could feel the healing of 2 generations, a father and a stepfather and a son, when they met them in a contextual understanding of how things came to be. This maturation of soul work that we're in right now is the recontextualization of all of it as a curriculum from a tragedy. And so this moment of pivot that we're in collectively is, I used to use this example a lot in business, that you try and move the organization in big chunky ways, and it's not sustainable. But if you think of like an oil tanker, they have 100 little rudders under, and it takes a mile to turn the ship. It's so big. That's kind of what's happening across this spectrum of human expression. Each of us is a little rudder. And pretty soon, when all the rudders are in line with their light, following their path, the whole cosmic emergence is right there for us. We're so close. So close. And it's really coming down to the simplicity of answering this one question. Who do we want to be next? Like, we've learned a lot about what it looks like when we don't get it right. Who do we want to be next? To realize we have that much empowerment to collectively choose what happens next. Not to be victims of our story anymore. To be the heroes of our own salvation, our own redemption. And you and I have this conversation long going about our deep Christian roots and this, how we hold the view of God sets the tone of our entire lens of perception. And Dr. Hawkins' map, I shared that in the lesson just before this one tonight. This fear-based construct is so black and white. It can't tolerate the nuance of expression. And I think in terms of gender expression and neurodiversity, and we're exploding into this non-binary expression right now, and it's so chaotic. We don't even know who's good guy or bad guy anymore. Truth will become lies, lies will become truth, and it's in service to helping us re-engage with that inner guidance system. And this pivot is this massive invitation across the planet for us to pivot towards wholeness, because that is what brings us into balance with the me-we-ness. Because when you're whole, you can't help but want wholeness for everything around you. You have nothing to feel lack or loss or separation. But coming into wholeness, it is a nervous system reboot. You can get so far consciously from the neck up, but the nervous system part, you've been teaching me that over this last year and a half. Sleeping on the back porch and, just changing the whole tenor of choice. Out of the fear-based choosing because I'm afraid of how I'm going to be seen or met or...
It's fascinating how we get disconnected from knowing what our nervous system needs. And when you look back, you're like, well, of course that didn't work.
Of course. I just saw a TikTok today. The TikToks, the messengers are just out there so loud and proud. They are filling the airwaves and shifting the algorithms of messaging right now. And this one was talking about the myth of, let the baby cry themselves to sleep so they can learn to self-soothe, and we're screaming because we know that that's not true, that babies come in this dysregulated state, and it's the caregivers that create the co-regulation that leads to the patterning of self-regulation, which sets them on the path of a healthy, happy life. Like, we really have so much work to do around the nervous system. So psychedelic experiences that aren't well curated can be more traumatizing for those dysregulated nervous systems. And we just have to have the bigger conversation about how we want to show up. Who do we want to be next? There's a great thing from Aubrey Marcus, and I had thought of something similar, but the languaging that he shared was so brilliant, that it's sometime off in the future, and we did it. We made our way back to wholeness with each other. How did we do that? And
Map
then
it backwards.
exactly reverse engineer what our hearts know is possible. This inductive, deductive lens of perception, like the visionaries can see the potentiality of this moment. But we have to break it down into a step-by-step, turn-by-turn navigation for all of the inductives, and that's 80% of the population. So this languaging, this messaging around this healing path, it has to go through the nervous system first. Every bit of it has to be muscle tested. People have to have agency over their experience. You and I have talked about some of these processes that are just, dip them in the deepest part of the primordial goo of their story, and
We're going to talk about this in our. I wish I had a notepad right now. We can watch it back. So this is the stuff we can do a talk on, you and me. This is, this feels like my battle cries around harm reduction.
Yeah.
Just like such a glaringly obvious lacking part of the conversation around psychedelics that I have to say something.
Well, for all the safety reasons, yes, and we are not honoring the path of the medicine.
No, it's this very masculine approach too.
I've been sitting with this focus on integration for the last few years and really realizing it's more that recontextualization of this moment and what these medicines are here to help us do, and to use them as a rite of passage, not an ongoing therapy, to create ritual and meaning and depth around this invitation to come home to the human experience, right? Like all of my beautiful initiation with the Dagara was about this, the power of ritual to bring our nervous systems through the portal of possibilities. Ketamine could be amazing if it was used in a recontextualization conversation, where that neuroplasticity is wide open. But so many people are having these journeys without the right context around them. So I think the medicine's going to bring consciousness to the rest of us. We'll figure this out.
Yeah. It's going to take some trial and error.
And some good metrics.
All things do.
We have to be able to lay out the key performance indicators of this path that keeps us on track with transparency in the learning process. We are becoming a learning organization, not an avoiding of learning organization as we've been in the past. And so we have to learn really fast. And that was the thing when we were setting up dashboards in organizations, is we would have to really design the test to look for the low-hanging fruit, to look for the quick return on information, to create proxy scenarios that would help us begin to understand where the mechanisms of shift were in the organization. And it's a hive mind experience. Everybody has to see the issue through their lens and then apply their brilliance to the conversation if you want to learn fast, right? So that just showed me that when we are engaged at that level of curiosity, excitement, concern, but there's a central we're in this together sense about what we're doing, we accomplish amazing things. Our collaborative consciousness is just now starting to come online. And people I hear now saying, we're going to open source everything. We're not going to try to create intellectual property rights. They're recognizing that the codes that are coming through us right now, we don't own them. We're just the conduits. We're just the space holders. We're just the collaborators.
I was on the phone with a girlfriend earlier who's visiting family on the East Coast. And like me, she's the only, she feels like the black sheep in her family in a lot of ways. And she said today, they ganged up on her kind of at the dinner table last night and were really taking shots at her. And she finally said she's hit this point where she could not, and she's almost 50. She's turning 50 this year. It's the first time she said she felt like she couldn't hang with the conversation. She could not take it on the chin.
Yeah.
She had to say something. And
yes.
when she did, she said it, they were she's like, I don't even know if we're going to want to visit each other anytime soon. They were in just utter shock that she finally
found her voice.
And I'm sure I'm talking too long here. I'm sure that we learn the hard way that way too, right? Because when it first comes out,
it's messy.
It's messy.
Oh my God. When mine first started to get out, I was like, oh man, who am I? I was really shocked at some of the harshness that was waiting behind all that sweetness.
Right.
It was hiding back there, waiting for some moment of exhaust. And I think that's the exhaustion. We are just at our limit.
Oh, we've been holding it in the throat.
Yeah. You know those workshops, the guy who's going around and you get there at 6 and you're done at 9:30 and it's this cathartic scream, primal scream groups and everybody's pillows and blankets, nobody touches, and I'm like, yes, these are safety valves of the communal nervous system, getting more and more of that permission to hold that primal scream and release it. The collective somatic work, we have drumming and dancing and singing and chanting and engaging our nervous systems in this recalibration of from fear to love in the body. That's why breathing together. I know the app is a long ways off from what it needs to be. And it's holding a place for what it could be, with a collective conversation around what if one of the earliest indicators of healing the communal nervous system is the number of people who slow down and take a breath together every day. Think what that does for the children. To have people just slow down and take a breath. So when I had the pulmonary embolism, I was 42, so was that 22 years ago? Yeah. And that choice to come back lined up with that first breath coming back. And so I've always had this link in my soma around the choice to breathe is consenting to the human experience.
That's what I was just gonna bring up, is could we talk about what that means?
Yeah.
What do you think that means, consenting to the human experience?
So let's stop at this lesson and we'll go to another.
Okay. And then can we stop after that?
Yeah, to be
And just be girlfriends?